Good afternoon and welcome to our only meeting of December. It's a little different venue, but we felt like we needed to do this to manage the social distancing. And the invocation will be led by myself tonight, and respects to the flags will be led by Councilman Kyle Newton. Please rise. Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the many blessings that you have bestowed upon our city, our community. We ask that during this 2020 that we understand that you're in control and we're not, and that we should be good servants and we'll get through the pandemic. I'm convinced that we will. We ask that you take care of our city workers, those that come in contact with our public, and that you keep them safe and away from harm. We ask that you guide this governing body and the decisions that are before us tonight, and for those decisions that we'll have to make in the future. And we ask all these things in your name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we get into the body of our meeting, we do have a special presentation tonight, and it revolves around our comprehensive annual financial report for the 2019-2020 calendar year. And I'm going to invite David Phillips to the podium. David will tell you a little bit about himself, what he represents. He knows the city well. He's with Green & Company, and we look forward to his presentation. David.
Great, thank you for allowing me to be here. This year has been very non-traditional. A lot of challenges. Normally at this time we would be presenting the final report. But if you remember, the city was able to get some significant coronavirus monies, and it always frustrates, and there's a lot of guidance that needs to be provided in the Office of Management and Budget. Haven't provided any guidance yet. So everything is really in a holding pattern until they issue that guidance. So that's kind of forcing our hands with a lot of our clients that we can't issue the financial statements until all that gets worked out. So I kind of wanted to let you know kind of where we stood in that. Hopefully you have before you a PowerPoint presentation, which is just kind of the highlights, the summary of the fiscal year 2020 audit and the results. Again, we're still in the process. I do have a graph, like I mentioned to you, but we're just having a hold at this moment. On the first page, or the second slide there, we'd just like to remind everybody about the importance of internal controls, that there's checks and balances that take place, so that one person can't just do everything. And so that's one of the things that's very important for management and for you as a council to want to make sure of, that there's strong internal controls. We also like to remind you that these are your financial statements. We help with the preparation of those, but Margot and her staff literally go through and simply tie all the numbers. They make sure that they tie to your accounting system at the end of the day. All right, next page. Our responsibility on slide number 3 really is to issue an opinion. Remember, we look at things from a materiality perspective of around 2%. And you have what is called a clean opinion, which is an unmodified, which is a good thing. If it was modified, we would say everything looks good except for something. And so you don't want a modified opinion, you want an unmodified opinion. All right, let's look at the bottom slide there on that same page, number 4. We're going to briefly look at your fund balance. Your total fund balance decreased $3.3 million. You have various categories of fund balance. You have some non-spendable fund balance of about $257,000. You have some restricted fund balance, mainly for the TIP And then you have some assigned fund balance. Remember, in your fiscal year 21 budget, you'll set aside around $1.3 million. And a lot of that, remember, was the economic incentive that you had made those commitments, and so you went ahead and set aside those funds for that. So that was 1.3. The next slide, which shows us slide number 5, which is our unassigned, which means there's no constraints. These monies are available. You have a total balance there of about $8.5 million, which is about 28% of your 2020 actual expenditures and about 27% of your 2021 budget expenditures. And then we kind of list you a chart just so that you can see kind of how it's ebbed and flowed over time. And so it's kind of held pretty much in a pretty tight pattern there over the past few years. So why do people want to have a strong fund balance? Well, before the health pandemic, there was a lot of varied opinions on that. Some people said, we don't want anything, because that means we're holding too much. But what has happened with this health pandemic, you see a lot of people so glad that they had some unassigned fund balance. It helps carry you during tough times until times get better and maybe your revenues go back to more of a normal pattern. So again, remember, some of your revenues are cyclical. Your property tax bills on your real property, they go out in October, people pay them in December, they want the property tax deduction, and then in January, February before they become past due. But then you don't really collect a lot more real property taxes the rest of the year. Business licenses are very cyclical as well. Again, it helps you with significant emergencies and unanticipated expenditures. It gives you better interest rates when you have to issue debt. If they see you have a good track record of maintaining a solid fund balance, they're going to give you better rates. And the last bullet point is what we already mentioned, just important with uncertain economic times like the health pandemic. All right, well, let's look at the next slide. Slide number 7. We're going to briefly look at your general fund revenues. You had total revenues of $29.3 million. Remember, the bulk of those revenues are really in 2 major categories. One being property taxes and other forms of taxes, and then also in your licenses and permits. They make up over 80% of your revenues, and then you have other categories as well. Your general fund revenues decreased about $700,000 or 2%. Now that looks a little bigger than what you expect, but look at the point of the next bullet point. Remember, you moved out your cemetery, recreation, and sanitation functions, and you set up separate special revenue funds. And so those revenues and expenditures now are being reported not in your general fund, but in separate funds for fiscal year 20 and going forward. So when you see the final financial statement, you'll get a better picture of all that. Also, your local business licenses were slightly down by $461,000. Remember, you had been using Newsstrap in prior years to really go after and try to collect on a lot of those. Well, those revenues have really dropped off because it's kind of caught and got all of them in cycle now. You also had some higher intergovernmental and miscellaneous revenues of $558,000 as well. Your revenues, your actual revenues were about $800,000 still over budget, which is about 3%. Primarily is the business licenses. Actually, a lot of those still came in strong. The municipal association ones, they still really collected at the state even higher than the prior year, even in the health pandemic. So those really still came in very strong. And then I just wanted to mention on the bottom there, you issued a refunding general obligation bond this year of $1.6 and it paid off another old debt because of cost savings that this provided. All right, on the bottom of slide number 8, we're going to briefly look at your general fund expenditures. You had $30.6 million in expenditures. The biggest one is always public safety. It's around 15.4. 5.7 million in general government, and then in the other categories. You had a decrease of 1.1 million or 4%, but remember, just as we did not report the revenues in here from the sanitation, cemetery, parks and rec, they were all moved, remember, to the special revenue fund. All those expenditures were moved as well. And so that helped drive down the expenditure somewhat here in the general fund as well. You did have some increases in a lot of the functions. Remember this year you gave a 2% COLA increase. Also benefit costs continue to go up and some of the operating costs as well. As it relates to budget, you came in over budget by about 1.2 million, but that was related solely to this refunding debt service company. Because when we issue a bond, we turn around and we pay it off, they net, but we have to show them gross in the financial statements, and those items didn't have a budget as it related to those expenditures there. On the bottom there, we talk a little bit about your transfer out. Remember, a lot of the cemetery, the parks and recreation, sanitation, they generate a lot of revenues, but you have to support and make up the difference. If they don't bring enough revenue in the red to cover it, you have to transfer in funds to cover the salaries and everything else that keeps those operations running. Next slide. We're going to briefly now look at your hospitality fee fund. You had revenues of $3 million. This is slide number 9. Slightly down. What we have traditionally seen when we look at a lot of our governments is that if your community had a lot of dine-in restaurants, you were impacted a lot more. If you were a community that had a lot of takeout, a lot of drive-through, not dine-in, you just drove through, those restaurants actually did really well. They held up. So a lot of times it depended on your mix as it related to restaurants. Your expenditures here were approximately 2.1. And remember, it left an increase in your fund balance of about $900,000 to an ending balance of about $4.5 million. Remember, those monies are again restricted for tourism-related costs. They can't just be used for anything, but there are still a lot of things that they can cover that kind of go across the board there. On the bottom, slide number 10, we're just going to briefly look at your sewer and water funds. Both of those had increases in net position. Most of that is due to the rate increases that kicked in. And so that's kind of what it talks about there on that slide. Most of the time the expenses were pretty flat, except in the sewer. They were actually down from the prior year. Next slide. We're going to briefly, on the top of that page, which is slide number 11, we're going to look at the pension liability. Remember, the city not only has its own plan, but also participates in the state retirement plan. Your own plan, you actually have an asset. And what that means is that you have put enough aside to cover the retiree benefits as of this moment in time. It can change from year to year. But you've done a good job of funding your liability. Now, unfortunately, the state retirement plan, it is underfunded significantly. I think it's around 60% funded. But the liability that you have for being involved in that state plan is about $16.8 million. It was $15.5 million in the prior year. The real kicker here, the really important part, is that bullet point a couple down there where it talks about the rate increases. The way the state plan hopes to get funded better is that it's raising its rates. It raises it one per year, but in fiscal year 21, the one we're in, they actually suspended the rates because of the health pandemic, but they're going to add one more year on the back end. So you're going to ultimately pay for it. It'll just be a little bit later on down the road. All right, next slide, number 12. Wanted to mention briefly your retiree health insurance plan. You have a liability there of about 1.3. It hasn't changed a lot. And so there's a lot of no disclosures on this and the retirement plans in the financial statements. All right, next slide, number 13. We're going to briefly look at your capital assets. The balance there was $157.6 million. It increased $2.8 million. A lot of that was due to additions, and we kind of list some of those that you just kind of remember what took place in fiscal year 2020. Remember, we had a lot of roof replacement at City Hall, at the Municipal Business Center. Remember also recreational improvements. You also had a number of water projects and so forth going on as well. But remember, when we capitalize something, we also have to recognize depreciation expense. So if you had a fire truck at $1 million over 10 years, we're going to depreciate it at $100,000 per year. So whatever you acquire, we begin to depreciate it as well. And so you had total depreciation expense and disposals of about 2.7 and 5.5 million for your governmental and business type activities. All right, slide number 14. We're going to briefly look at your long-term obligations. You had a balance of 112.5 million. It increased 7.7 million. Remember, you actually had a lot of activity taking place in your governmental activities this year. We had already mentioned about the refunding bond that you issued to pay off another bond. But also remember, you issued installment purchase revenue bonds for the new parking garage that's taking place as well. So that's taken, and then you also issued a lease purchase. So the total of all those was around 7.9. As it relates to your long-term obligations for your business type activities, you really didn't issue any new debt. You just kind of made your regularly scheduled principal payments and began to pay it down. So on the bottom there of slide 14, just a reminder of kind of what your mortgage payment is for fiscal year 21, the year that we're in. It's about $2 million and $7.4 million for governmental and business type activities respectively. All right, next slide. Again, it's just a reminder of the health pandemic. It all depends on the severity and the length of the, hopefully we're getting near the tail end, but if this continues for a long period of time, you can see businesses go out. Property taxes could be affected. You've already seen recreational fees go down during the health pandemic because people aren't going to be exercising if the gym isn't open or if it's not safe, just because of the situation with the health and coronavirus. So just a reminder there that this is an ongoing struggle. And again, the more you were tied to tourism-related revenues as your support, it hurts you a lot more than if you have other types of revenues to kind of sustain you during these times. On the bottom 16 slide there, there's some new accounting pronouncements coming. The second one there is talking about leases that if you enter into a long-term lease, we roughly need to treat it like debt in the future on those statements where we show debt. And so if you ended up renting a piece of property for $100,000 for 5 years, we literally set up a liability for $500,000 and a right to use assets. They want you to treat it like debt in fiscal year 22 going forward. There's also this fiduciary activity standard, and they're going to shuffle things around and maybe move things between some buckets. But at the end of the day, the total numbers are the same. It might just be that certain activities have to be reported in a different fund than they were in the past. All right, next slide, number 17. Currently, we're not aware of any findings, significant deficiencies, or material weaknesses. We still have not performed all of our single audit. That's what we're waiting on for the Office of Management and Budget to provide guidance. And so we're going to have to look. We've got a pretty significant amount, over $500,000 in coronavirus monies, and we're going to have to test that. But we don't even know how to test it yet until they give us those guidance. When we issue the management letter, which will be forthcoming as well, we don't really have any issues to report there as well. The last slide, number 18, again, a reminder, you have an unmodified opinion. You have really good financial opinion. You really weathered the storm, I think, really well. And again, the staff, they had to do a lot more scanning than they've ever scanned before. We weren't here that often, but they were scanning. And, we were having to do a lot by email. And so, it's been a challenging time. But they did a great job of getting us the information and trying to juggle all the balls that they have going on. Questions? I know I kind of get quick. Anything on the PowerPoint?
Yeah, any questions, guys? I know that's a lot, but most of us have been around for a while. I also know that in your packet you have the financial statements and look over those. David, from a policy-making point of view, is there anything that you hadn't talked about that you think is important that we be aware of in the next coming fiscal year?
Not anything right off the top of my head. I think always the driver is the balance between maintaining a good but not overly too high of a fund balance. It's always juggling that. And I would just really encourage you too, as you've been doing, is continue, if you have a good year, put money aside. Save it into a capital projects fund, because there's always things that are coming down the pipeline that you're going to need to spend for. And people don't realize a ladder truck might be $1.2 or $1.3 million. That may be just 1 year's of excess that you have in the general fund, but that would just buy you one ladder truck. And so again, you try to start setting aside always and planning for these big capital projects or equipment that you have to purchase.
Good, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you, Margo. The minutes of our November 9th meeting have been distributed. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Not hearing any, do I have a motion to approve? I have a first by the Mayor Pro Tem, second by Mr. Harvey. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? The minutes of November 9th pass unanimously. We have a couple items of old business, and the first item is request consideration of an ordinance to annex and zone to a PDD, that is a planned development district, approximately 131 acres plus or minus, generally located off of Harriet Circle and Crestview Road. Mr. McCune.
Mayor, City Council, on items A1, A2, B1, and B2, I'll introduce Maurice McKenzie, our Planning Development Director, to go over the details of these items for your background.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you. And Mayor, as you mentioned in the introduction, the general location of this property is 131 acres located on Harriet Circle, Crestview Road. The best way to describe it, and also you can see the map in your packet, it is close to Midway Elementary School. And the applicant is proposing to annex the property to the PDD Planned Development District in order to construct a residential development consisting primarily of single-family houses and with potential for townhouses as well. Now, with the PDD Planned Development District, specific document that outlines the development standards and zoning bill for this property must be created, and that is located in your packet as well. And you can see that the proposal is to have the property broken down into 4 development tracts. Tract A, which is located adjacent to Midway Elementary School, consists of 40 acres, and Tract B is adjacent to Tract A, and really between Tract A and Crestview Road, and that consists of about 32 acres. Tract C, which is across Crestview, consists of approximately 20 acres. And then Tract D is across the street, across Harriet Circle, from Midway Elementary School, and that is consisting of about 40 acres. In your document, you have the draft Planned Development District document that outlines specifics for each tract. We can go into any questions you may have about that document later. First, I just really want to touch on the highlights of this document, and we can go from there. But again, 131 acres is what we're discussing tonight, and a maximum of 450 dwelling units is proposed for the entire site. Now, each tract, if you look at them, they have a maximum number of units for construction flexibility, but regardless, this development will be capped at a maximum of 450 units. Again, I mentioned earlier that this is predominantly a single-family development, and there is potential for townhouses on 3 tracts, tracts A, B, and C, and that's really dependent upon market conditions. According to the applicant, the focus is mainly single-family residential at this time. A couple other items in this document that may be of interest: that all single-family dwellings will not have a traditional slab construction. They will have a finished floor elevation at a minimum of 12 inches above the adjacent grade. Inside the document, they have specifics outlined regarding common areas, amenities, sidewalks, landscaping, all that's addressed. And regarding the single-family development, the minimum lot size is 6,500 square feet, and the houses range in size between 1,500 to 3,500 square feet. If townhouses are constructed, those individual units will be between 1,000 and 2,400 square feet. Currently, this property is located in the county, and there are 2 zoning classifications that address these areas. For tracks A and B, that property is zoned IZD, which is Innovative Zoning District. That's similar to a PDD, Plan Development District, but in the county. And under that document, they have currently approximately 180 houses being constructed on tracks A and B. Tracks C and D, zone R20, single-family residential. Essentially, that means minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet, which is just a little under half-acre lots. Now, there's been some concern, and obviously there should be in the area. There's some traffic demands in the general area, particularly along Harriet Circle and at the Midway Crestview intersection. And this has been identified as a need for future road improvements. The Anderson Area Transportation Study, ANAS, that you're familiar with, the policy committee, they did include this in their long-range plan. And by doing so, this helped advance the funding to create some preliminary drawings that are forthcoming, we should be getting those soon, which will outline some means to improve the traffic conditions in the area. From what we understand, it will consist mainly of traffic circles and possibly a road relocation as well. And applicant and the DOT, they have been in communication with each other regarding the plans for DOT and the developer's plans. So those plans can mesh as this project moves forward. Michael Day, our transportation planner, is here if you have any questions regarding ANAX and the long-range plan and these plans moving forward. He might be able to give you some more insight to that as we go along. This was heard by the Planning Commission on December 1st. They approved it by a 5-2 vote. And since that time, December 1st, there have been some refinements made to the document, mainly because of communication between the city and the applicant, and the refinements made seem to strengthen the document. And I'll go over those specifics. But one was increasing the minimum lot size of single-family dwellings from 5,000 square feet
to 6,500 square feet. That does make a difference. But 5,000 square feet to 6,500 square feet, which makes it more in keeping with some of the newer developments we've seen in the general area. Also, an increase in side yard setbacks went from 6 feet to 7.5 feet within the development. And also, I touched on it a moment ago, but now there's a requirement for single-family houses to be built with a higher finished floor elevation than what's required by our standard building codes, and that is a minimum of 12 inches. I believe the building codes is 4 inches. So those are the differences that have been made since the December 1st Planning Commission meeting. But I'll be glad to answer any questions, and also, as I mentioned, Michael's here to answer any traffic-related questions as well.
Thank you, Ms. McKenzie, and we appreciate the information. Let's say this. I know that the Planning Commission met and there were several people that made comments. And right now, before we maybe get into council discussion, I'd like to hear from people who came to make comments. So if you came to make comments on this particular agenda item, I would ask that you go to the podium and just tell us your name and your address, and you can talk to us in our business meeting. Or, you know, sometimes it's coordinated enough to where one person is talking for everybody. And we don't mind that either. No, I didn't mean for you to sit down. But if you want to go to the podium, yes, sir, you go right ahead.
Thank you.
And thank you for allowing us to speak. My name is Jeffrey Stevens, and I'm a lifelong resident of the Midway Road, Crestview Road community. But I lived there a long time, and my address is on Barefoot Trail, north of Crestview on Midway Road. And I'm glad to hear there's been some changes to the original development proposal. But nonetheless, many current and multi-generational residents of the Midway Road, Crestview, Hammond community, like myself and family, moved to this rural community from the city of Anderson, And many moved out of the city of Anderson because we preferred to live in a more rural, residential, agricultural area with significantly less population density and housing density and multiple taxes than in the city of Anderson. Now, years later, with the most recent proposal to annex these 100 and rezone these 130 acres between Oak Hill and Crestview and west of Midway, north of Crestview, in order to develop a high density housing project, Crest Creek, the city of Anderson is attempting to yet again move into this residential agricultural community. I'm using a very soft term, move in. There are a couple other terms that come to mind. The city apparently intends to move to our very doorstep, in fact, and it brings the high density 5 residential units per acre housing. The major increases in local community population and the major increases in the already existing traffic congestion that is ridiculous between 8 and 10 in the morning and 4 and 6 in the afternoon, 3 and 6 in the afternoon. As currently proposed, the Crest Creek development represents more high-density housing, overpopulation, traffic density, and traffic congestion than we had before we moved out of Anderson to this residential agricultural community. Additionally, the city's arguably sketchy acquisition, annexation of a 10-foot wide strip of private property through the yard of a private residence on Oak Hill Drive in order to establish the contiguity with Area D of the target property to be annexed is a bit troubling at best. And to my knowledge, no documentation has been provided of the exact legal acquisition mechanics of this 10-foot wide strip of private property, which goes to Oak Hill and thereby allowed annexation of Area D. To demonstrate the transparency and honesty and full disclosure, which I'm sure the City Council and administration must surely aspire to, written documentation of the city's lawful acquisition of this 10-foot wide strip of private property should be made public and provided to the Anderson County Administrator, Anderson County District 1 and 7 council persons, and the Anderson County Attorney as soon as possible. For the residents of Midway, Crestview, Hammond community, until the housing density of Crest Creek is reduced to a maximum of 2.5 residential units per acre, and a substantial road improvement plan, including traffic circles at Midway and Crestview roads, and at Oak Hill and Harriet Circle, and widening of Harriet Circle, Crestview Road, Oak Hill Drive, and Midway Road is adopted, funded, and initiated, these annexation and rezoning actions and the Crest Creek development will remain highly objectionable. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rich Smothers. I live at 3005 Barefoot Trail. I'm not as articulate and smooth as Jeff is there, so I come up here similar to Jeff. I moved from Greenville, downtown Greenville, city of Greenville, West Prentice Avenue. I was born and raised on a dairy farm, and I wanted to get back into the rural area, so I moved to Anderson a year ago. We love it. We love seeing the farm animals going down the road. We love being out in the community in the rural area, and it's everything my wife and I of 35 years wanted to get back to, and then we find that this is going to happen. I'm a little torn. I'm a home builder. I believe in growth. I believe in development. I have no problem with it. We do it. What I have a problem with is the density. 4 or 5 houses per acre, that doesn't fit the community, it doesn't fit the neighborhood in which lives out there. We have to, I suggested we would want to stay consistent with what is there. Regarding the traffic, I'm sure there's a lot of studies on this, as you indicated. If you go down Midway Road, and you get down to past the school, when the buses are letting out or during school, you're there right now today with the population. You're there forever. You're at that stop sign forever. Can you imagine what it's going to be like with 4 or 5 houses per acre? Imagine each house has at least 2 cars. They have kids maybe in the teens. They have 3 cars, 4 cars, 5 cars. It is going to be ugly. I would just ask that you consider this and think about this and maybe put it open, table it until there's more input, or at least until you all have come up with a solution yourselves, because the way it is proposed scares me. Thank you.
Thank you. I will open it up to discussion, council. Mr. Chapman?
If, I guess to start, since the question was asked, if maybe Frankie could speak to how the property was acquired, the legalities behind it, so that way he could put a few people here that asked the question at ease with it.
Yeah, Frank, I'll first start to remind the council that the city is not going out and annexing this property on its own, that we have an applicant before us that has asked the city, private developer with free market property rights, to consider an application for annexation, and that's what you're doing tonight on first reading. And I'll allow Frankie to talk about how we got to where we were from another applicant that requested to annex part of their yard into the city. Frankie.
Yeah, and it's something we haven't done before, in that we borrowed it from other cities to get contiguity to this area that wanted to be annexed. The 10-foot strip, we did not acquire. The person that owns the 10-foot strip asked that it be annexed, and we agreed to annex it. He filed a petition for annexation with South Public Records. So that
Mr. Chairman.
When that is done, when 100% of the people do that, then under our statute, it's not necessary to post the property, because the only people that are affected is the person that's being annexed. That 10-foot strip was annexed in order to get this property. That's the way we did it.
Thank you. Ms. Roberts?
Mayor, can I have a request that Mike Gay come up and address the traffic issue? He can speak more specifically.
Good point, Mike.
As far as the traffic goes in that area, we're well aware that there are issues. I guess before I get into that, I'll let you know where the money's coming from. I work for the city of Anderson, but I also staff the Anderson Area Transportation Study, which is what we call a metropolitan planning organization. It's set up by your federal transportation bill, and the money in that bill is funneled through the state to this quasi-governmental entity that I staff. I know that sounds really confusing, but basically, it's just the money from the federal government coming to the locality, and then we have a planning board that will allocate those funds based on our long-term plans. So that's where this came from. The money is not the city of Anderson's. This is federal money that we're going to use. Currently, we're reworking all of the intersections. Well, not all of them that you spoke about. We cannot touch Oak Hill and Harriet Circle. Those are not state roads, so those are county roads. That will have to be something that we work through the county to see their plans for that. But currently we actually have some very early plans on a couple of options that may happen at Crestview and Midway and Harriet Circle. Both involve traffic circles, 2 circles, and they involve both of them road relocations. Now, the way this will look is Harriet Circle would be relocated into Midway in one option, and Midway would be relocated into Harriet Circle in another. DOT is getting their recommendation to us ready, and we'll know kind of the direction we're going to head after that. But we know it's a problem. We've actually kind of put this thing in high gear when we realized that there was an option for development about 3 or 4 years ago. So we're ahead of the curve on this as far as getting a traffic solution. Now again, we can't stop school traffic. As y'all know, if you've been around any school in the city, in the county, most of the time if you hit it when it's you know, check in or check out time, I mean, you're going to get stuck there for a moment. But do you have any other specific questions I can answer?
Explain the composition of the board of ANATS?
The ANATS actually has two entities. One is called the study team, and the study team is made up of professionals. These are folks that recommend projects, and what they do is we'll sit down and we plan for 25 years in the future, and we lay out all these projects and we rank them, and then we take them to what we call the policy committee. The policy committee consists of state senators, state representatives, local officials, as well as members of the community. So we feel like we've got a good mix there, and they vote on these projects, we bring them to them, and that's how they're funded.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts?
Michael, can you also speak to the timeline of these improvements?
I certainly can. As I said earlier, we really began this process 3 or 4 years ago. So as we're scheduled now, and it is subject to change, especially with the COVID pandemic going on, we're scheduled to go to right-of-way in fiscal year 2021, which we are in. And we're scheduled to go to construction sometime in fiscal year 2022. Now, that may be a little ambitious, I'm not sure, but this has been going very quickly. So it's our hope that we maintain that schedule and can move ahead. So that's kind of where we stand timeline-wise.
Ms. Stewart?
I know you had mentioned that you was aware of this plan or this possible annexation 3 or 4 years ago, and you started this study, but when did our applicant come to us wanting to annex it if they've known about it for 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So Mr. Gay is actually not talking about the annexation. He's talking about there was a planned development in this area in the county under county regulations that fell through, and those plans were sitting out there about 3 years ago. So it's not too recently that this has been brought before you, and the application's been brought before you. What's fortunate about it is that we're 3 or 4 years ahead of the curve on the traffic demand and the traffic studies to address it. So engineering's been done, as Mr. Gay alluded to be able to handle this area. DOT is very understands that it's being developed. There's already been a lot of other development in the area around Tillahanna High School with density, and so this is compatible to that area.
Also, if I could, I was approached by what was county staff at the time and asked that ANATS asked me where these projects were on the list, and we were very fortunate at that time that they had already gotten to the point where they would be funded. So we just really got on our DOT staff and said, hey guys, this is going to happen. Let's get on the ball so we don't mess up any development.
Anything else, Jeff? Other questions? Ms. Stewart again?
Maybe this is a question for Maurice. Maurice, when you're looking at Area A, and I know Area A backs up to the playground of Midway Elementary Schools, what is going to be done there to protect or to buffer from the school to that residential area, especially with those children back there playing, because it does back up right to the back of the playground there?
Yes, sir, and I'll have to check the specifics of the document, but we do have landscaping and screening guidelines outlined in here. I can look into that a little closer for you. And also in our zoning documents, when you have two incompatible land uses, being a school to residential, we have specific language in our zoning ordinance relating to certain types of screens and landscaping.
Fencing or?
Fencing,
or
landscaping,
berms or-
combination berms, combination of both. But I'll double check in here to see what the specifics are for this property boundary in Tract A.
I will add to that too, that the developer and this is what you want to do from a planning standpoint, and this is why this area is attractive, is that you're gonna have families moving into the area that have kids that go to that school, so the connectivity is important, so the connectivity piece to the subdivision, the neighborhood itself, so that the school is part of the neighborhood. I mean, that's who will be attending the school. Along with, we have a greenway, multi-use path that is going to connect the East-West Parkway through this area, and so connect to the school as well, and go down Oak Hill Road. And so that's been in planning for about 5 years now, and we're getting close to right-of-way and construction on that as well.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Mayor?
I have another one for Maurice. Could you explain if you go through individually through each of the tracks and you add those up, they're cumulatively a lot more than what the maximum will be. Explain how that works and what the differences would be if they overdeveloped one and underdeveloped another.
That's right. In each tract, there are a maximum number of units. Now, I think if you add tracks A through D on the maximum, it ends up being like 575 or something like that. But again, this development is capped at 450. So based on, for instance, let's look at tract A, for instance. If the maximum number of units in tract A, 200. Okay, if they choose to maximize that in tract A, then that means they can only have 250 more units total in tracts B, C, and D. So it just gives them flexibility they may want to develop in a denser fashion in one tract, and then in other tracts it may be less dense. But again, maximum at 450 units, minimum lot size is 6,500 square feet, so they can't go any denser than for those two figures.
Okay, and just for clarification, if the property was not annexed, did not fall under the PDD that we had them modify to meet our standard that we thought was a minimum, how many homes could go in there if they just stayed in the county and they just developed it as it is?
Yeah, according to our calculations, and again with tracts A and B, with that innovative zoning district that's already approved in the county, tracts A and B can have a total of 180 or 181 units. Tracts C and D currently are zoned R20, half-acre lots. According to our just general calculations and math, once you take out land for road construction, stormwater, things like that, open space, I would estimate you could have close to 300 units as is.
Total.
Yes, sir. But again, give or take. But definitely 180 in tracts A and B.
Any other questions, comments?
So, if I could, I'd add a few more things. So, I guess in the planning commission, it was asked who would be the council person for this, who would serve this area. And my name was brought up, and obviously I'm closest to that area, but I think with all the developments being done, based on what the city administrator has discussed, it will be all the city zones will be recalculated because C2 seems to be growing because that seems to be a highly desirable area for developers and builders. And so, but currently right now I've received a few calls from people inside this, that are constituents, but I've received more calls from people who are county residents that are against the annexation. I think there was an email that I had sent out that when one person had asked me specifically about the annexation of the 10-foot strip, It was my understanding that it was posted, but after the fact, because I've been on 12 years, I've never known for us not to have a piece of property posted, but after Mr. McLean explained to me that it was not posted for reasons that both parties involved were, I guess, in agreement of it. It's not required to be posted. So, but with that, it's a very, I've even done research, it's a very common thing that a lot of other municipalities do it. It's to tie into pieces of property rather than going and develop and acquiring whole subdivisions to make it contiguous. But with that, I mean, I've received a number of phone calls, positive and negative. I mean, I've received a few that have been positive, because it's going to, you know, there's from a fact of housing for families that want to be close to the schools. That's inherent with most developments. They want to build around schools, and especially for those type of dwellings, they want to be close to grocery stores, schools, churches, and hospitals. And all of that is right there at this location. That's why it seems to be growing so much. But just want to make those comments.
Thank you. Good comments. And in regards to redistricting, I think the whole community is growing, and so a lot of redistricting will occur both on the city and the county level. Anything else, guys? We have all the information we need at a work session. Ms. Holden?
Just a quick question for Mr. McEwen. He had mentioned earlier that the ATAC started looking 4 or 5 years ago at the subdivision, at the area for traffic, and that this piece of property had been approached for development 4 or 5 years ago. Do you have any more back history on that of when it was going to be developed, or is that just what the county shared whenever we discussed this with them?
Yes, essentially it was another developer that had plans, and they had plans for all these tracks, and so the county had requested ANATS to begin speeding up the process. So ANATS is doing a lot of intersection improvements. ANATS also built the East-West Parkway, so that came from that group as well, the federal funds for it. But over the last 4 years, there's been a lot of let's identify intersection improvements, bottlenecks, and traffic network. And so the county, upon receiving information and knowing that this area was being developed, I mean, you have Vanderbilt Commons that's very dense, right behind Tillahan, Brunson Ridge. You saw how quick and market-driven that was built out in the county. That you knew this area that was going to be developed, particularly with the amenities that were just mentioned. So it was asked of ANATS to push that up the list, which was done, and that moved it farther along the engineering process to where we are today.
And to follow up just real quick on those 2 developments that are in the general vicinity, what kind of restrictions, if you compare the restrictions on this document that I saw tonight or got in the packet, how do those compare with those 2 developments or those general areas around there?
So this is a lot more restrictive. There's almost no one in South Carolina that is requiring a house to be raised higher than the building code states. Or if you were in Charleston, what the floodplain recognizes that you need to have an elevation. And so in this instance, you have that being added in here, which adds value to the house, makes the house more expensive, but it's not a slide-built home. This isn't quick trap building homes. They are planning a variety of products throughout this development. In comparison, if you look at Vanderbilt Commons, it is track homes that are slide-on grade. Brunson Ridge is the same. And our landscaping requirements are also more intensive.
So these would be more, these document would be more restrictive than what's being developed now currently in the county.
Yes.
With that, I'd like to have a motion to approve this, Mayor.
We have a first by Mr. Harvey,
Second.
second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any further discussion?
Mayor.
Mr. Roberts?
So do we know when the tracks A and B were initially rezoned to the IZB?
I'll yield to Mr. McKenzie for that.
Thank you. I believe it was 2018. I can check through my email. I was forwarded the documents from the county, but I believe it was maybe 3 years ago.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously on the first reading. We'll move on to the second reading, item old business, and that's the request consideration of an ordinance to rezone 1509 East River Street from LO Limited Office to GC General Commercial. Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you. The applicant requests to rezone this property to GC General Commercial in order to operate a U-Haul business with rental vehicle storage on the lot. Under the current zoning, which is LO Limited Office, this type of use is not allowed, and it would require a GC General Commercial zoning classification in order to move forward with this type of business. The GC General Commercial District allows more intensive office, commercial, retail, and service activities that you typically see along major thoroughfares. Now, this property may sound familiar to you because back in the summer of 2019, June of 2019 to be exact, this property came to you zoned R5 single family residential. It was formerly a non-conforming use. There's a commercial building on the property. It went vacant for a while, so it lost its non-conforming status, but the applicant came to you and requested an LO, limited office zoning classification, and at the time, the applicant was planning to operate an office or office uses on the site. Again, the commercial style building is already on the property, so when you reviewed that as a council, you saw that it was a practical move to rezone it to LO, limited office, which is a classification that's compatible with nearby residential properties. If you look at the map in your packet, you will see that properties directly abutting this property are zoned R5, single family residential, and then across the intersection with River Street, Shockley Ferry, on all the other corners, you do see GC General Commercial, which is what the applicant is requesting tonight. Now, this also went before the Planning Commission on December 1st. The Planning Commission recommended approval of this request, and their justification basically was because the other three corners have GC General Commercial zoning on that. Now, the staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission was different. That was a staff recommendation of denial, mainly because when this came before you last year, the LO Limited Office District made sense from the standpoint of it was abutting a residential district, and LO Limited Office uses is a step down. It allows office uses and personal service uses, things of that nature. I'll be glad to answer any questions for you. The applicant is also here as well.
Thank you. Maybe before we get into our questions, if the applicant would like to speak. And again, sir, would you just, for our board, state your name?
Okay, my name is Gary Simpson. I'm the property manager for Miss Fields that owns the property. As y'all can see, when y'all looking at the plat here, every corner is general commercial. 1509, if you look closer, you can see that it used to be general commercial until we put a brand new roof on it. Well, we put a roof on it, and then the city came and told us that it fell back into residential. Well, that right there, I mean, every other corner is general commercial. So we sort of went by what the city wanted us to do when we went for a limited office, not knowing much about what's going on till this year. I've done a little research and looked into this. Actually, that building did not sit empty for 4 months. The last leaser that was leasing the building, she moved out. The last time, when she had the power cut off, it was January 10th. Billy Hockman leased the building May the 1st. The only reason it sat empty was we was putting a roof on it. That's the only reason it was empty. So technically, that building was only empty for 3 months and 20 days, which comes short of it being empty for 4 months, like the building code said. The city had always got the best interests of its citizens at heart. Miss Fields is my daughter. She owns the property. And they have been some tickets wrote on this property that's put black marks on her name. She's never been in trouble all her life. Never had the first thing against her. Now she's got 2 criminal tickets against her because a U-Haul truck was parked over on that property. We simply want this property put back general commercial, where Billy Hockman, who is leasing the property, Billy also owns the property across the street. He wants to put his U-Haul trucks over there. As simple as that. He's not wanting to put any junk cars over there or anything like that. But what gets me is, they say if the property sits empty for 4 months, it falls back. Well, the old Peach No. 5 property across the street, it sat empty for years. It never fell back. Also, the corner of Gossett Street, there's nothing on that property. Nothing. It's general commercial. It never fell back. I don't understand why 1509 East River Street is being picked on when the rest of the corners are general commercial. And we just want it put back like it was. It's been a rough year for everybody. And I also want the city to do something about these tickets that's been wrote against. Danielle is also my daughter. If any of y'all got daughters, sons, you know how it feels when you get something put against your kids. I want that straightened out. I mean, it's nothing she did. Somebody parked a U-Haul truck over there and they got a ticket on it. So we want the property put back like it was. And I don't want to thank the mayor and the council members for letting me speak tonight. And I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. Do we have any questions or comments for the applicant or generally for the administrative team?
Yeah, I like it.
Go ahead. Then Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Mayor, really respect, our planning commission. I really respect, our planning commission. We appoint those to try to have the best interests of the city as our sounding body, but from time to time, sometimes they may not be aware of what our city plans are or, what may be in the surrounding area. When one of the things that this council has always prided itself on is protecting its neighborhoods. And while it is true that the other 3 sides are general commercial at this intersection, and that was the reason why the Planning Commission voted in favor of it, the side at 1509 East River Street, it's different than the other 3 sides because it abuts back into a residential neighborhood. The other 3 sides backs up to general commercial, which is already general commercial. And, one of the things, like I said, that we pride ourselves on is kind of protecting our neighborhoods. And once you start encroaching into a neighborhood, it just keeps going. there's no stopping it. You know, this council has acted on requests like this in the past, where we protected our neighborhoods. We try to make the best use out of buildings where people want general commercial, and come to a compromise where we can have a limited office to do other things, and we thought that was a good compromise that we came to last year. But again, the applicant is back before us again tonight, wanting to rezone it general commercial, and as the council member who represents this district, I just don't want a general commercial, which it has a lot of, it's more, I guess, more opportunities for other things to go there, whether the U-Haul business is there today, where a liquor store is there next week. It's just, it gives a lot more opportunities for other things to happen. And once you rezone something, it's zoned that. There's no turning back. And again, I would just like to make a request that we deny the zoning request to general commercial and leave it at limited office.
Take that as a form of a motion.
Yes.
We have a first by Mr. Stewart.
Second.
Second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Chapman, you had something?
I just have a couple of questions for Mr. McKenzie. If this goes to general commercial, is the applicant or the property owner required to screen landscape screening from the adjacent residential properties?
That's correct. With GC general commercial, that would be an incompatible land use to that of what is behind this property. And in our zoning ordinance, we have a specific outline language regarding screening between a certain type of use and residential. So it would be fencing, landscaping, combination of both.
Okay. Could you also then kind of explain? I wasn't clear on the applicant was saying that it was one occupancy, but that when they put a roof on it, it made it go back to another occupancy?
Yes, sir. This was operating.
This
was operating as a non-conforming use because it's zoned R5 single family, or it was zoned R5 single family residential before June of 2019, and it was in use as, I believe, it was a beauty salon. Is that correct? On the property on that site. So, if the non-conformity was never lost, for instance, Mr. Simpson was mentioning that it never did lose that 4 months. If that's the case, the only thing that could operate there would be a beauty shop or something similar to that, because it was a non-conforming use. Now, fast forward to last year, it was rezoned to LO limited office. Therefore, whatever's in that menu of what is allowed in LO limited office, that can go there now. And essentially that is office uses, your personal service uses, your lower intensity commercial uses. And in order for the U-Haul business to operate, GC would be required. Now, as far as the other properties that were mentioned regarding why do they not revert back, those properties are already zoned general commercial. That's why if they go vacant for 4 months, they can still continue to operate as general commercial because they're not non-conforming uses. But again, this one was until it was rezoned last year. Now it's no longer non-conforming. It can operate with that menu of items such as your offices, your personal service uses, the low intensity type commercial.
Okay, so it never was GC?
No, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Can I follow up with a quick?
Yes, sir. Ms. Harvey?
So, Mr. McKenzie, how many non-conforming do we have citywide?
There's a good many citywide, whether it's commercial or even residential for that matter. We may have a duplex somewhere in a single family district that may be considered non-conforming. And again, the same goes for residential as well. It's that 4 months of being vacant, or if it's burned or just damaged by more than 50%, you lose your non-conforming status.
Anything else, guys?
Mr. Mayor, one more follow-up.
Mr. Chapman?
So the ticket that was issued for the vehicle that was parked there, non-conforming, was it ticketed because it wasn't moved, or was it just ticketed? Because normally the people doing the ticketing usually give warnings.
Yeah, I'll answer that question because I have it here in front of me. There were 13 violations documented from July 26, 2019 to July 7, 2020. It was presented in court in October, and there was a fine of $1,000. The judge also stated and gave permission to have one vehicle on the property parked in front of the building to deter a break-in. And the judge noted the vehicle had to be licensed, insured, and fully operable. So that was the finality of the violations. The violations were for violation for U-Haul trucks, violation for selling vehicles on property, and it just repeated itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a first and a second. No other questions? All those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion of denial passes unanimously. We have 7 items of new business. And we'll move directly into the new business. Our first item is the request referral to the Planning Commission of petition to rezone 304 Broad Street from RM10 multifamily residential to LO limited office. Mr. McEwen? Mr. McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a referral, so this will be scheduled to go before the Planning Commission next year on January 5th, 2021. But what the request is for 304 Broad Street, the applicant wishes to rezone it to LO limited office in order to operate a dog grooming business. You can see the location on the map that's attached. And LO limited office, like we were mentioning a moment ago, it allows low intensity business and personal service uses, such as dog grooming businesses. So again, this is a referral coming to you tonight. If you move it forward, it will be heard by the Planning Commission on January 5th.
Thank you, sir. I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, Mayor, that we refer this to the Planning Commission.
I have a first by Ms. Horgan, second by Dr. Thompson. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously to the Planning Commission. Our next item is request consideration of an ordinance to rezone 812 Whitner, West Whitner Street from RM10 multifamily residential to NP neighborhood professional. Mr. McKenzie.
Thank you. The applicant does request to rezone this property to NP neighborhood professional in order to operate an office use on the site. An office, specifically a law office, existed in this building for many years, but then it lost its non-conforming status. It was zoned residential, but it was in operation as a law office. Again, 4 months passed, non-conformity was lost. So fast forward, the applicant is requesting to rezone the property in order to bring it into zoning compliance so they can operate another office on this site. It's a 2-story house originally built, but it's been an office for some time, like I mentioned, and it's configured in a manner for office uses inside, and also there's a small parking lot in the back of the property. And this NP neighborhood professional zoning, it actually was not an original zoning classification in our zoning ordinance of 1998. From the wisdom of council, there was a need determined that we need some sort of zoning classification that is even less intensive than LO that we've been talking about earlier. Neighborhood professional allows offices and houses, period. So that's why the neighborhood professional zoning classification was recommended, and we do recommend approval of it. The Planning Commission heard this on December 1st, and they unanimously recommended approval.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem.
Maurice, will a similar type of business be going in there, such as a law office?
What we understand, it is a law office. The applicant is here to may be able to address that a little bit more, but my understanding is it will be an office use, and again, it would have to adhere to the NP zoning guidelines, which is extremely restrictive.
Okay.
Would we like to ask questions? Applicant?
Did you ask me a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think the question is it going to be intended? That's okay. Sometimes it's good not to hear us. Could you go right up here, please? Thank you.
Yes. Okay, yeah, I purchased it, of course. Victor McLeod was the last attorney standing that I purchased it from. I've since been in communication with him. But the home was, needed an incredible amount of work. And needless to say, the technology that was there was totally obsolete. And so even if I had known about this 4-month regulation, it couldn't have been ready for anybody in 4 months, ever. And so it lapsed. And if I had known, maybe I would have just put somebody in there in a room, I don't know, but it did lapse. And the best use of it is exactly as that law firm used it. Now, it could be a CPA, it could be, you know, an insurance company, whatever that NP allows is fine with me.
So right now, you don't have a, I'm over here. Right here. Right here.
Oh, okay.
You don't have a prospect, right?
I've got, yes, I do. I actually have a commercial company that has actually 2 possible tenants.
Thank you. Any other questions of her? Ms. Roberts?
That building has been standing there for so long, needed to be used, but needed some renovation. And I assume that's what you plan to do.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that either.
Is this not working?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that building, that old house has been standing there.
The renovations, and do you have plans to renovate it?
Oh goodness, I would love to show it. Well, I intend to invite all of you when it is completed. I am very close. I've already met with the architectural review group who did approve my exterior paint colors. It looks, well, just drive by there. It's been sandblasted. It looks like a mess. But on the inside, it's probably 85% done. In fact, I met with my contractor Thursday, and I dropped by today to take some lighting. So we're getting close.
Well, that building could be a beautiful home. It's been there for so long, so I would like to...
I'd love for you to come see it. It's, yeah, and I've undone a lot of that. Well, the law firm, the original law firm that was in there, the McLeod Doyle group, they went in there in 1977 and were there for 4 decades. And needless to say, it had the trappings of the 70s. So you can imagine what kind of layers of wallpaper that were up there. You know, the stuff from Mad Men, literally. And all that's done. And it's being brought back to its original glory, I think.
That will make a great difference in that house on that corner there, so I'd like to move that we consider this ordinance.
Now, first by Dr. Thompson.
The
Second.
original corner.
Second by Mr. Stewart. Jeffrey, did you have something?
You may have already answered this question sort of inadvertently, but is this in the historic district?
Yes.
It is? Yes. So the exterior character will be maintained as it is?
Yes, it already went before the VAR a few months ago for exterior paint change.
Yeah, and the exterior is being maintained as it is with this. It's essentially an Italian Renaissance architecture.
Oh, I know the home is.
Yeah, and it's going to be kept that way. The exterior is simply going to be painted and improved, some of the wood repaired, all that. But other than that, the exterior is going to look exactly the same, just pretty.
Mr. Mayor, I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
It's for Mr. McKenzie. Is this neighborhood, since it's going to revert back to neighborhood commercial, is landscape requirements required for it, separation of the main from the neighborhood?
That's correct. Well, we will do work with the applicant. I mean, it's already a developed site with the parking lot, so what we do in those situations, we'll work with them the best we can to enhance that, to make it more appealing, and also have a better buffer between this commercial use, if you will, and the residential use.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have a first and a second. No further questions. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously on the first reading. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about this.
We can't wait to see. Our next item of new business is request consideration of a resolution to express the desire of the City Council that the G. Ross Anderson Jr. Federal Building and U.S. Courthouse remain open and functioning as a U.S. courthouse and other matters related to therefore. The city manager is going to review that for us.
Mr. Mayor and Council, as you know, there's an iconic building that's anchored to downtown, and there's been some publicity lately of notifications, particularly the media covered it, that after the building of the courthouse, federal courthouse in downtown Greenville, that there could be a possible consolidation of the Spartanburg federal courthouse and the Anderson federal courthouse. Mr. Frankie McLean, our city attorney, has been involved in this issue and has also been in touch with Senator Graham's office. And I'll turn it over to Mr. McLean to go through the details of what this is for you.
Okay, I've passed this resolution. Judge King was notified a while back the intention of the Government Administration Office to close down the Federal District Courthouse here in Anderson and move him to Greenville. And he very much does not want to go to Greenville. He's got with the Central Law Hall. He practiced law in Oconee County and was elected judge in 2011. And he moved to Anderson in 2015. And he just bought his second house in the city of Anderson. He likes Anderson. He's a very nice fellow. We'd like to work in keep it here. We'd like to keep this courthouse here, I would hope, for our benefit. It was named after Judge G. Ross Anderson in 2002. We dedicated to him. I think not only for our own purposes, the fact that it helps us economically with employees there, with jurors, with litigants that come to Anderson on a weekly basis to help our things downtown. It also is not a good idea for the government or the United States government to pay judges to go all the way back to go to Greenville. We have prisoners here that we ship to, or we transport. We still transport some to Greenville, but we also transport some to Anderson. It'd be a whole lot better to keep everything here. I think that hopefully be your opinion. Senator Graham has agreed to try to help us with this, and the mayor sent a letter, the chief sent a letter, the county council has passed a resolution, the legislative delegation has written letters, and this is just another thing to give Senator Graham. He's asking for all he can to help us, help him do what he wants to get it done.
And I'll add to it, as part of this building and the employees that it houses, the activity that it houses, and the city, built in addition to City Hall, we're under contract with the Marshal Service to house federal prisoners, which we average a population of 910 federal prisoners in that federal facility at City Hall. And that was done out of convenience to this courthouse. We do transport Greenville as well. And also, the city council invested in this area to provide additional parking. That's important. That's also to be used by the courthouse. That was recognized in the letters and Senator Graham's letter as well, that these improvements were made in convenience, and that the size of the courtroom is important because it's much larger than the essentially miniature courtrooms they built in the Greenville Federal Courthouse. And so this would allow social distancing in the time of the pandemic, but also allow for, if you had dual or double, multiple defendants on trial, which happens, this courtroom would allow for that, and the Greenville courtrooms would not. So with that, we request your consideration of the resolution.
Thank you, sir. Questions, comments? Ms. Stewart?
I just have a couple of comments. One, I just think it's very poor taste with the recent passing of Judge Ross Anderson that they consider, taking are shutting down the courthouse named after him, you know, with him just passing away recently. So I just think that's very poor taste on whoever decision that was. And the second thing is, you know, we all, and I can just see the writing on the wall. You know, years ago when Johnny McBrown was over the, I guess, the federal jails, there was a large effort to try to take away the city of Anderson's federal prisoners and house them all in Greenville as well. And I can just see if they close this courtroom down, that may not happen soon, but I guarantee it won't be far behind, that they'll make an effort to try to take away our federal prisoners as well, to house them in Greenville or somewhere else as well, which will be even more of a significant loss of revenue for our city. So just a couple of comments for thoughts for consideration.
Thank you. Anything else? Ms. Holt?
I agree with my fellow Councilman Stewart on his comments, and with that, you know, I'd like to make a recommendation that we approve this.
Well, the first and a second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Comment?
The original use for that building was not a courthouse, it was a post office. But it's been redone, and redone beautifully. If you have never gone in that courthouse, you really need to go in there, if nothing else for the 40, because it is a beautiful area. This is something that would be a great loss to Anderson, it would be a great loss to our community, it would be a great loss for this area. So I'm in total agreement that we need to try to keep this in Anderson.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Stewart?
Have we made a effort, how about our Senator Tim Scott have we reached out to Senator Scott about doing a letter of support for us as well?
We have not. Judge Kenny mainly wanted to get up to Senator Graham, who sort of leading the effort to do this. And who's already made contact with the Government Services and with other members of the legislature.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chapman?
I just want to know, if they do close it and move to Greenville, and I guess in the new building there, but does the federal court system pay our police officers or pay their time to transport?
So it's actually under a different contract. So the General Services Administration for the federal government manages government facilities, and so it manages the courthouse facility, the federal courthouse facility. And so the letters have been directed to the General Services Administration for review and reconsideration of what Judge King was notified of. Our contract with the federal prisoners is to the U.S. Marshal Service, and within that contract, we are reimbursed for transport of prisoners. And you know, we transport kind of all over the place. I mean, even throughout the state and to other states, but again, a majority of them are held here for local court.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Hogan?
To sort of answer Mr. Stewart's, our Senator Lindsey Graham is chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and that is over these federal courthouses. But it certainly wouldn't help, probably wouldn't hurt to try to get Senator Scott on board also. But it's his committee and he's chairman.
Yes.
And even after that, you might, I don't know what kind of position Congressman Jeff Duncan has, but he is our representative. So I don't know if you need to reach out to him as well. I don't know.
All good points. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously, that resolution. Our fourth item of new business is request consideration of the Electric City Transit Agency Safety Plan for 2021. Mr. McEwen?
Mayor and City Council, as you know, Electric City Transit is run as a local transit transit system throughout the city and county, and is funded federally. Through the federal process, they often require different safety measures, different reports that we must submit to them for compliance. And that's what you have before you today. That's about all I know about it. Keith Scott does a fantastic job. He's a director of transit and running it and very efficiently. And does a good job of being a good steward of this transit system. That's a great asset to us. And I'll introduce Mr. Keith Scott to provide the details of what's before you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here tonight to seek approval for our transit systems agency's safety plan. The FTA has issued its final rule. This is something that the FTA has been working on for probably 15 years or more. So they have finally gotten their final rule in place, and in this final rule it requires certain operators of public transit systems that receive financial assistance under 49 USC subsection 5307, which is our urban funding, 5307, to develop public transportation agency safety plans. So this is the safety plan that we have developed. The benefit to us, it will make our transit operations safer. This transit plan includes all of us in the transit department, not just me as a director or dispatchers. It also includes our drivers because we want to make sure that when we put this plan in place, that involves all of us so that we're safer for our employees, safer for our passengers, and safer for the city as well. So SCDOT has covered all the costs for all consultants that helped us in putting this plan together. So this cost has been nothing to us. And so at this time, we recommend approval of our agency safety plan.
Thank you, Keith. Any comments, questions? Mr. Mayor? Ms. Holman, then Mr. Stewart.
I had a chance to look through this, Mr. Scott, and it is I don't know who did this in your department, but it is and you might have done it. It is a great document that pretty much looks like it covers everything from A to Z. Even the last page is the, I guess, organizational chart of your department and with matrix and everything else, and it's impressive document, and I appreciate the hard work that went into it, and I'd like to just take a second to thank you for what you've done for our citizens during this pandemic to keep our buses operating safely and you know, as efficiently as possible. It's certainly been a difficult year. I know for me, even getting out and going somewhere, I can't imagine what it's like to run a bus service during these trying times, and under your leadership, how it's worked so efficiently and so safely. And so I just want to take a minute to thank you for that. And I know some other, my fellow council members feel the same way, and they also may have some additional comments to make, but I'd make a motion. We approve this beautiful document that was created for our safety of our employees and our citizens.
Well, a first and a second by Dr. Thompson.
And also thank you for hard work in transit.
Well, we have a lot of good bus drivers and dispatchers that do a lot of hard work too. So not just me, but it takes all of us to do it. And that's the same thing with the plan. It takes us all to make it work.
Ms. Stewart?
Yeah, I concur with my fellow council members that it is a great document, but just a point for my clarification. On page 2 of the document, it talks about does the agency provide transit services on behalf of another entity? I know we provide transit services on behalf of the county where they provide funding. Is that an accurate statement that we do not do that, or should that be checked a yes?
Well, we are the operator of the system. Even though we partner with the county, we are the applicant and the operator of all those funds. But those funds that are done by the county are the 5311 funds, which are rural funds. So our 5307 funds are urban, which are our city funds.
but we're doing that on their behalf, is that correct? Because without them making the request, like to do the Belton route and doing, we wouldn't have done it without them doing it, so aren't we providing that for them?
We're partnering with them. I guess it could be just, I can have them to go back and look at that to make sure that we're correct before the final issue for the plan being approved from the federal level. I'll go back and ask them that, but there is kind of a memorandum out there. We are the applicant for the funds as well as the operator of the system.
Yeah, just trying to get clarification.
I'll ask that and I'll get that clarified. If we need to change it, we will.
Yeah, but it is a great document, and just commend you and all your staff for everything you do.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you, sir. The next item is request consideration of construction contract for the Gray Street and Churchill Avenue sewer replacement projects. Mr. McEwen?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, Mr. Jeff Caldwell, our utilities director, comes up here. As you know, electricity utilities operates water and sewer utilities. The sewer is a very valuable asset to the community, very needed. And we take a very proactive approach to identify issues and set aside, under your leadership, capital monies to reinvest into the system. And you heard some of that from the financial reporting that was provided to you earlier in the meeting of capital asset reinvestment. And so with that, there has been some issues identified through the assessment, and again, Mr. Jeff Caldwell, our utilities director, will go over that with you.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. Mayor and Council, several of you probably know about this issue. Our wastewater collection staff investigated a complaint of a sinkhole on Gray Street several months ago and found that there was a sewer line failure in the front of 404 Gray Street, which is near the intersection of East Market Street near the park. And so we immediately assessed the sewer lines and the manholes along that street and determined that a full replacement was needed. We also looked at some additional areas in that vicinity and found that the street right next to it, Churchill Avenue, should be considered for this replacement also. So due to the emergency nature of the road being closed and things like that, we solicited 3 bids from local contractors. We did receive 2 from J&M Construction and Moorhead Construction. The low bid was $304,870, and moving forward with this project will allow us to meet our goals and also compliance with the CMON programs and those initiatives. Like Mr. McEwen said, we do set aside budgeted funds for repair and replacement of our sewer lines as needed, and so with that, we'd recommend approval of a contract with J&M Construction.
Thank you, Ms. Caldwell. Questions, comments? Ms. Stewart?
You know, I know we solicited 3 bids, but what was the discrepancy? You know, there's like a high margin between the high bid and the second bid. They're just too busy, just put in a number?
I believe so. Like Moorhead is doing a project for us for a private individual now that will be turned over to the city, so they do have a project they're working on. And the other bidder was Fontaine, which has a lot of their own development projects going on, and also some other public stuff with the hotel and the parking garage area.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Have a first by Mr. Stewart, second by Mr. John Roberts. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you, Jeff. Our next 2 items of new business, new business, actually refer to the executive session that's listed on your agenda, which is the discussion of matters covered by an attorney-client privilege relating to personnel and potential claims and discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual agreements. So I would entertain a motion to go into executive session. First by the Mayor Pro Tem, Second by Mr. Harvey. And we're actually going to go in this room over here if you guys want to stay in here. And we should not be very long. We actually will come back out and take action on probably both of these items. Entertain a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Have a first by the Mayor Pro Tem, second by Mr. Chapman. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? We're out of executive session. And we have two agenda items, new business, item 6 and 7. Item 6 is request consideration of a resolution approving the amended and restated City of Anderson retirement plan. Mr. McEwen.
Mr. Mayor and Council, there's some policy changes before you on the administration of the city pension plan. And Ms. Margaret Martin, our finance director, will go over those items with you. Ms. Martin.
All right, thank you. So the City of Anderson retirement plan was amended and restated effective January 1, 2015. Section 9.1A of the plan does authorize the city manager and the finance director to amend the plan from time to time without approval of council when changes are limited to those that require compliance with tax laws, IRS regulations, those kind of things. The city manager and finance director have amended the plan. We are requiring 3 items that we need, or discretionary, that we need council approval for. So staff is recommending approving this resolution, which would include installing a 30-year cap in the formula for all new hires after 1/1/21, changing the cost to purchase to an actuarial calculation for all new hires after 1/1/21, and those 2 changes would help sustain the city's plan, and to update the pre-retirement death benefit for vested employees who die before their earliest retirement date. So if you approve these changes, I will be happy to send you the amended final plan. So that's what we're requesting in the resolution.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion we accept it as presented.
Well, first by Mr. Chapman.
Second by Dr. Hollis.
Second by Dr. Thompson. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? That resolution passes unanimously. Thank you.
I'll be sending it out.
The last item of new business is request consideration of a resolution consenting to placement of certain property into a multi-county industrial and business park, and authorizing the execution and delivery of an intergovernmental agreement with Anderson County, and approving an infrastructure credit agreement with Friendship South Carolina Preservation LP. Ms. McEwen.
Mr. Mayor, the City Council, we appreciate your consideration of this item. This item is really a community development and enhances the livability of our residents that are located at Friendship Court. It's located at 719 West Malden Street, it's in the city limits of Anderson. A new company, Friendship SC Preservation LP, has recently acquired the property and is planning a $5.5 million reinvestment into the property to upfit 80 units and to completely upfit them for greater livability, amenities for those residents, along with the grounds of the facility as well, of the apartment complex. We believe this certainly fits the mission of the City of Anderson. Therefore, we're recommending your consent to this. Anderson County has passed 3 readings of it already. They do this through a state statute that allows us to provide an infrastructure credit agreement, which in terms is a tax agreement or a tax abatement of a certain portion of the taxes that are due on the property. So after the investment of $5.5 million, there's obviously a lot greater additional taxes on the property, and this allows the project really to go through and them to maintain the affordability and the livability of the houses and the tenants that are currently there without increasing their rates. And so this is certainly a good project for the city, and we would recommend council move forward.
Thanks, questions, comments, Ms. Harvey?
First off, I was, other council members have spoken about it and known people that live there. I've sort of been familiar with this since the mid-70s, and I'm excited for the area and for a company coming in to invest in our community. I'd like to thank Ms. Spears and Economic Development and her team working with Anderson County and Oconee County. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and to get it going, to bring it to us tonight, to move it forward, I think it revolutionizes that area of town, and we can continue to, invest and do what we can to help our neighbors. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve.
First by Ms. Harvey.
Second.
Second by Mayor Pro Tem. Any further comments, discussion? It does stabilize that, helps stabilize the neighborhood. Very good. Good night. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That passes unanimously on that resolution. Is that something that we're signing, Margot, before we leave?
I've got something for you to sign.
Okay, thank you. It's Christmas, yes. The Mayor Pro Tem says we should say something about Christmas. It's Merry, yeah. Merry Christmas. We, one of the things about COVID is that, generally we do have a function or two where we're all together. We won't do that this year, but I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas. Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. First by Mr. Newton, second by Mr. John Roberts. And I guess we'll be back in council chambers in January. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.